Morena, everyone. Welcome to the certification session. We'll start in a few moments once everyone's online. Good morning, everyone. You're joining our Commerce Commission seminar on certification. We'll start in a couple of moments once most people have gathered online. Good morning, everyone. We'll just wait another couple of moments for people to get themselves set up in the Zoom. Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. No mai, haere mai, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the final of our 5 in-depth seminars on the changes to our credit laws. I'm aware that some of you may have watched the previous sessions, and I'll apologise in advance for any repetition of the outline of the session and our housekeeping. Many of you will have attended our overview seminar a couple of weeks ago. However, we know simply from the large number of attendees here today that many of you didn't. So if you missed it and you'd like to see a high-level summary of the Commission describing the 5 main areas that are changing, which are responsible lending, due diligence, directors' duties, fees and advertising, and of course today's session certification, as well as hearing from the Commission leaders discussing the education and enforcement approach the Commission is taking, then you can find a recording of that session on our website. The link is about to pop up in the chat. We've also made a series of informative handouts detailing the main changes that are underway. If you've not received these, you can email us, or they are available on our website. And again, the link will pop up in the chat function. For those of you who did attend the high-level seminars a couple of weeks ago, we'd like to thank you for filling in the surveys at the end of that seminar. Your questions were really, really valuable, and they helped us make sure that these in-depth sessions deliver information that's relevant. As you know, today's session focuses on certification, and our expert Kylie Higgs will be addressing some of your key questions and then also available for a more informal Q&A chat session at the end. But first, I'll open in the usual way with karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te taonga. Kia mā kena kena ke uta, kia mā taratara ke tai. E hia ki ana te atakura, he tio, he hoka, he hauhunga, te hei mauri ora. Before inviting Kylie to speak with you all, I'll quickly go over some housekeeping. If you have technical problems, raise your virtual hand. It's in the reactions section on the bottom right of your screen. And then we can see if we can assist you by chatting to you privately in the chat function. You can also use the chat function to ask any questions that arise for you during our discussion today. So Penny Fitzpatrick is handling our Zoom, and I'd like to introduce her to you now. Welcome, Penny, and thanks so much for helping us out.
Kia ora, Sonia, and kia ora koutou. It's a pleasure. I'll be handling the chat function today and putting through any of your questions to Kylie. You can write these in the chat function at any time, or you can note them down in the survey that will pop up at the end of this webinar. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Penny. So now let's welcome today's expert, Kylie Higgs. Kylie is the Manager of Certification Services at the Commerce Commission. Welcome, Kylie.
Thanks, Sonia. Good morning, everyone. As Sonia said, I manage the certification services team at the Commission. We're a new team set up specifically to manage and support the new certification requirement that we're speaking about today.
And I know you and the team have been incredibly busy. So, it's lovely that you've been able to make time for us today. We're really grateful. So today we wanted to address some of our lenders' queries from the survey that they filled out at the high-level webinar. And as I said, we'll also have some time for you to answer questions that pop up in the chat function. But before we get into that, Kylie, I think it would be really useful for people if you gave us an overview of the certification requirements.
Thanks, Sonia. I certainly can. And I just wanted to start by confirming that the dates for the certification regime have not changed. So from the 1st of October, lenders and mobile traders will need to be certified by the Commerce Commission. Now, there's a couple of reasons why this initiative has come into play. It's in order to raise the standard for lenders and mobile traders operating in the credit industry, and it's to provide better protection for consumers as well. Now, certification costs $1,055, this is excluding GST, and it needs to be renewed generally every 5 years. Now, that fee works out to be about $211 annually and is due to be reviewed in June 2024.
Thanks, Kylie. Does that apply to individuals or organisations as a whole?
It applies to both entities and sole traders. Now, to gain certification, individuals, if you're a sole trader, or all senior managers and directors, if you are an entity, must be assessed as fit and proper persons, which means being financially sound, honest, reputable, reliable, and competent to do your job. The information provided for the assessment is reviewed from a holistic point of view, and no one single criteria will determine whether the application is accepted or determine the outcome of the application. You can apply for certification by selecting Consumer Credit Contract or Mobile Trader through the Maintain Financial Services tab on the FSPR dashboard. Once you've triggered the certification process, an email will be sent informing you of how you can make the required payment, and the application forms will be sent out in that email as well for you to complete. We have loaded a sample application form onto the Commerce Commission website if you require this to understand what information you need to compile. However, the application form that you need to fill out will be sent to you. It will be the most up-to-date form once you've triggered that certification on the FSPR. If you do have any issues with triggering certification, then you need to contact the FSPR call centre, and they have a free phone number, which is 0508 377 746.
Great, thanks. And I can see that Penny's popped in the chat function, both the link to the FSPR and also that phone number. So Kylie, the 1st of October is the date the legislation comes into effect. Does everyone need to be certified by that date?
No, actually it's not compulsory to be certified until the end of your first annual confirmation month after that 1st of October date. Now, this will help my team to manage the flow of applications in that first year. So if you're already registered on the FSPR on the 30th of September 2021, we consider your certification due date to be the end of the month that you file your annual confirmation. So if I can give some examples, your annual confirmation month is March. You will need to be certified by 31st of March 2022. If your annual confirmation month is October, then you'll need to be certified by 31st of October 2021. Now, to find your annual confirmation filing date, look under the General Details section of your FSPR dashboard. Now, if you apply to us for certification at least 2 months before your certification due date, so remember that's the end of your annual confirmation month, you can still legally continue offering lending or mobile trading services after that date if we've not yet made a decision. Now, there is an exception here, being that if we ask you for information to help us with the assessment and you've failed to respond within 20 working days. If you apply less than 2 months before your confirmation due date and we have not made a decision, you must stop providing any new lending or mobile trading services, and you must stop everything in relation to existing contracts from your certification due date until you approve your application. Now, please note, if you're winding up your business, you need to do this before the certification due date to avoid certification. This is because if you decide to offer no new lending facility and only remain operational until existing borrowers are fully repaid, you are still considered a consumer creditor. I should also add that we do undertake criminal history checks as part of the certification process. However, we will accept criminal history checks that have been completed in the last 3 months. So they do need to have a recency of 3 months.
Great, thanks. So Kylie, once a lender is certified, is there anything else they need to do?
You do have an obligation, Sonia, once certified, to remain a fit and proper person to hold your position. And any material changes that could affect your certification will need to be communicated to the Commission within 10 working days. A list of these specific material changes can be found in the certification guidance. Now, there are penalties that you need to know about too if you breach the certification requirements, and the court may order payment of these penalties if you provide consumer credit without being certified, or it's been cancelled or suspended. You represent that you were certified when you are not. You do not notify the Commission of changes in your circumstances as you're required to within those 10 working days, or you provide false or misleading information on your application form.
Okay, that's good to get that clarity. So after the last session, Kylie, some lenders asked for more clarification around any exemptions to certification. Would you like to speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a good question, and there has been some confusion around exemptions. So if your entity is licensed or authorised by the Financial Market Authority or the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, then you will be exempt from the certification requirement. Now, it's important to note here that the exemption is attached to the entity, not to the individual directors and senior managers within that entity. So therefore, you may be exempt if you're a senior manager or director of an entity that is licensed, but that doesn't mean that you're exempt for all entities that you may be a director or a senior manager for. Now, if your license from the FMA or authorisation from the Reserve Bank expires or is cancelled, then the exemption no longer applies, and you will not be able to offer consumer credit or mobile trading services until you have obtained certification. That's not hard to do. You just need to trigger that on the FSPR under the Maintain Financial Services. There are a couple of other exemptions that relate to the purposes of securitisation or covered bond arrangements and non-financial service businesses that provide credit on an interim basis. So please refer to our guidance or the regulations if you would like further clarity on those two other exemptions.
That's great. Thanks, Kylie. I see there's been a few questions in the chat about people who might be licensed or authorised by the FMA or the Reserve Bank. So it's great to get that clarity. Thank you. In the survey responses, people also described not having the role titles of senior manager or director in their organisation. So Kylie, I wonder if it could be useful right now for you to explain how the Commission defines those roles in the guidelines.
Certainly, Sonia, in another area where confusion has occurred. So it's a good question. Now, a senior manager is a person other than a director whose position allows him or her to exercise significant influence over the lending side of the business. So if, for example, we take an HR manager, they can exercise influence over the way the business is managed, then they should be certified. We would expect that if the HR manager was the most senior HR person in the organisation, that they would meet the definition of a senior manager. I've used that example because we've had questions around HR managers in the past. Our guidance provides a thorough definition of what constitutes a senior manager or a director if you need further clarification. I wanted to add too that you cannot be both a director and a senior manager. So if you are a director, then you do not need to list yourself as a senior manager when you trigger certification on the FSPR. Now, at the time that you trigger certification, all current directors and senior managers listed on the FSPR will need to complete the fit and proper person assessment. So this may be a consideration for you if you do have directors or senior managers that may be resigning or if you're in the process of hiring. If a director or senior manager is appointed or has resigned, is removed, or otherwise ceases to hold their position, then this is listed as a material change and you must notify the Commission within 10 days, as it could affect your certification. So we'll treat you as having known about any of these changes as soon as one of your directors, senior managers, employees, or agents become aware of it. For this reason, you should have processes in place to ensure you identify relevant changes and communicate them to us within that 10 working day period. Now, the appointment of a new director or senior manager will require a fit and proper person assessment, and the fee to be paid will just be paid for that individual.
Thanks. And I see Penny's popped some details, some links in the chat, which kind of speak to that a bit more and give people a reference point if they need it. So Kylie, I wonder if we could start with some of the chat questions that are coming through. There's some really good ones. There's one I think that's probably top of mind for people considering the date, even knowing the kind of the length of time that we've got to process. And the question asks, what if I don't get it done in time?
Oh yeah, good question. So we're currently finalising our enforcement policy for the certification regime. The Commission is likely to have some discretion as to how it undertakes the prohibition on enforcing consumer credit contracts without certification. If a situation occurs that you are operating without being certified, maybe because you haven't submitted your application with adequate time for assessment, or because your certification has been suspended or declined, then you must stop everything in relation to existing contracts from your certification due date until we approve your certification. If we don't approve your application, then it may be that the Commission allows an uncertified lender to continue to deal with existing loans for a period of time until those loans can be transferred to another lender. We intend to update our guidance shortly with this enforcement policy.
Okay. What if a lender wants to add conditions to their application?
Yep, that's possible. Conditions can be requested by the applicant or made by the Commission. A condition that may be requested would be something that will ensure each of your directors and senior managers is and remains a fit and proper person to perform their respective roles, or to the duration of the certification. You may, for example, ask that one individual remains in their current role or undertakes specific training or receives a certain level of supervision. A condition that the Commission could impose relates to when certification may be issued and when it ends. For example, it could be a reduction of the certification period from 5 years to 3 years.
There's been a couple of questions come through, and I know we had one in the survey as well about how long it's going to take. I wonder if you could talk about that to us now. How long is the time frame that we're looking at here?
So currently my team is prioritising October applications and any new applications in order to complete the certification process before the certification due dates. So unfortunately, the FSPR system does not allow real-time tracking of an application. However, we will send out communications to you as your application moves through the stages of the certification process. So that might mean once all your applications are in and you've paid, we will send you an update to say that we're moving you on to the stage where you need to get your police check done. And then once that's all finalised, we'll again send you communications to say we've received the criminal history checks and you're now moving into the assessment process. There are a few things that you can help so that with the timeliness for this process and for my team. One of those is that before you apply for certification, just to make sure that the FSPR dashboard details are all up to date. So that includes your email address, and that's quite important too because the FSPR sends out communications automatically. So if the email address is not up to date, then you won't be receiving those. We also need you to provide complete and correct application forms, making sure that everything's filled out, that it's signed, that you have acceptable ID, and that's done in a timely manner. Also, if you need to provide criminal history checks from overseas, that are supplied as well. The other part too that can hold us up is the completion of the MOJ check. So just making sure that that is completed in a timely manner once you receive that link as well.
Yeah, that MOJ check being your criminal history check.
Correct.
Hey, there's a question about the FSPR that I think could be relevant now, and it's from one of our the people watching the seminar at the moment. They say, I went on to the FSPR and it said FSP to confirm. What does this mean?
Oh, that's a really good question. So the FSPR has been upgraded into a whole new system. Now, when they moved everyone's data across to the new system, they didn't know whether people would want to be a consumer or a non-consumer creditor, because it was all under the same umbrella in the old system. So what happened is they've put FSP to confirm as your service, and they would expect you to go in and confirm whether you are now a consumer creditor or a non-consumer creditor. And for us, it's really good if you can go in and do that as soon as possible, because then we can understand what applications we are going to have to assess in the coming months.
That's great, thank you. And I just want to note there's lots of questions coming through. If we're not able to answer them today, we will see them in the chat function and we will do our best to answer them. Or you get the opportunity to ask them if we haven't covered it in the survey at the end of this session. So Kylie, there's an interesting question about those criminal checks, that MOJ details that you have to send through. How are criminal checks conducted for overseas directors or senior managers?
So overseas directors or senior managers still have to undertake the New Zealand criminal history check as well. The reason being is we use this to verify information in your application form. So every director and senior manager that's listed on the FSPR will be sent a link from the Ministry of Justice, and they just need to tap into that link and fill out the details, and it comes back through to us. You can also get the criminal history check sent to yourself as well. There's a tick box that allows you to do that when you complete the link.
That's great, thank you. There's a question here about when a new director or senior manager is coming on board. So the question says, if a new director or senior manager is due to come on board post 1 October 2021, does the lender need to wait up to 2 months for certification of the director or senior manager before the individual can fill their position? So can they start even if they're not certified?
That's a really good question. Now, if your entity is certified, then you can continue to undertake the services that you are certified for. We will assess the new applicant, the senior manager or director, and we will let you know if there's any changes to your certification. So it's business as usual until we've completed our assessment.
That's great. And then I guess a kind of obvious question, what happens if a lender's application isn't accepted?
So the Commission has 3 decisions that we can make. We can decide to certify, we can decide to certify with imposed conditions on your certification, or you can request conditions as well, or we can not certify. Now, if we intend to decline your application, we will notify you and the individuals concerned, explaining why, and giving you and the individuals concerned 10 working days to respond. Now, this is a minimum time, and we do have some discretion to extend this if required. All submissions must be made in writing because our current process does not allow the opportunity to discuss or be heard in person. We will consider your submission when making our final decision and ask for further information if required. Now, all your directors and senior managers must be assessed as fit and proper persons for the entity to gain certification. So if you have one director or senior manager that fails their fit and proper person assessment and the rest pass, then you'll have the opportunity to remove and or replace them so that certification can be granted, and we'll contact you in that situation. Look, you do also have the opportunity to appeal to the district court if you do not agree with our decision to refuse your application as well. So there are some options there, Sonia.
That's great, Kylie. Hey, there's a couple of questions coming through about where a director has a number of entities, and whether they pay a single fee. So I thought it might be good to kind of get a question which represents that series of questions. So the question says, I'm a director of a number of related entities or unrelated entities. Do I have to pay a single fee?
So you have to pay a fee for all entities that are going through certification. The relevant fee has been set by Regulation 24 of the Credit Contracts and Consumer Finance Regulations. It provides for a fee in respect of an applicant for certification to be charged of $1,055. And it does state for each person who is one of the applicant's directors or senior managers or proposed directors or senior managers. So this means that each respective director and senior manager of each entity will need to be assessed separately for each entity requiring certification, with a separate fee payable for each application. So for the avoidance of doubt, this means that the applications cannot be grouped together with a single application fee.
Great. Hey, so there's a question that's come through that has come through a couple of times in different ways over the seminars that we've been running, so all of the kind of subjects, in relation to a charitable trust and whether they need to be certified or not. So the question is that the lender, they are a trustee of an educational trust, providing Chromebooks on credit for students who aren't able to access that sort of technology. And they're wondering, do they need to be certified? I guess this comes back to that exemption question.
It does indeed. For the educational trust, yes, you will need to be certified. And if your role is as a trustee, then that would be comparable to that of a director or a senior manager. So all trustees in the educational trust that would meet the definition of director or senior manager under our guidance.
Yeah, great. So then another question about being a director of multiple entities. The question is, do they need to be certified for all of them?
Yes, you do. Your role in the various organisations may be different for each one, and this will be assessed individually each time. Each respective director and senior manager of each entity will need to be assessed separately, which I know can be tough, but we do look at them all individually.
So there's a question in relation to the criminal history checks. This person is suggesting that they have a criminal conviction and it's punishable by imprisonment, and in New Zealand, will they automatically fail?
No, not necessarily. This will be considered on a case-by-case basis along with the other criteria. And I think I mentioned this before, Sonia, that we do look at each individual assessment from a holistic point of view. Not one single criteria would mean that there would be a fail on that assessment. But I do ask that you supply all information that you can, because that really helps us with the assessment process.
Yeah, that holistic view that you're talking about. Hey, so Kylie, there's a question here that says, directors to be certified can be checked against the company office details of the lender, but how do you identify senior managers that should be certified when they aren't necessarily on the company's register?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So the director side is quite easy for us because that information is pulled directly through from the company's register. Although can I note there too that you do need to make sure that you have refreshed this data as part of that update to the FSPR, so that we've got the most up-to-date directors on the FSPR when we do your assessment. Senior managers, you will need to add in yourself. And again, that definition in our guidance is the best place to start to understand who the senior managers are in your organisation.
That's great, thank you. And while we've had lots of questions about multiple entities, what about sole operators? So there's a question that's come through that says, if it's a small company run by the director himself or herself, does he or she need a senior manager to be certified?
Not necessarily. You need to assess your organisation and understand who is a senior manager. Now, if that is just yourself, then that's fine. You will be assessed individually, and you as a sole trader, or if you do operate under an entity, will be certified.
That's great. And as we have had in many of the seminars that we've run over the last couple of days, we've got a question about a mobile trader. So they're saying that they're a new lender and a mobile trader, and they want to start immediately. Do they need to wait for certification?
If you're not already registered on the FSPR at the 1st of October 2021, you will need to be both certified and registered as a financial service provider before you can provide consumer credit or mobile trading services. So again, that's about getting your application into us 2 months before so that we have a chance to assess it and it doesn't affect your trading.
That's very clear, thank you. Hey, so someone's asking if they can get more information surrounding the opting out of certification. As they're saying their FSP renewal date falls in September. It's quite a specific question. I hope it's okay to ask this one. So they say, can we please get some more information surrounding opting out of certification this year, as our FSP renewal date falls in September?
Yep, absolutely. And it's a good question too, because there has been some confusion about when to be certified. So as we discussed earlier on, you do need to be certified by your certification due date, which is the end of your annual confirmation month. Now, if that is, say, March next year, and you've gone on to the FSPR to update your services, there is an option for you to select consumer creditor, and then in brackets it has prior to certification. So you can select that option. It means you're undertaking that service. And when you want to trigger certification, you would need to go back onto the FSPR and select consumer creditor. And then that would go through and trigger certification. Someone in September, that means that you would not need to get certified until September 2022 or the end of September 2022. So my suggestion would be coming back on 2 months prior to that due date, the first of the month before, and trigger certification then.
Yeah, it's hard doing it on the fly, Kylie, those working backwards with dates.
Yes.
But it's that 2 months prior that's important, 2 months prior to your annual confirmation date. Great. Okay, so there's a question about staggering applications, and I wonder if that's a useful one to go to now. Do we have to apply for all directors and senior managers at the same time, or can we stagger our application?
Well, that's a really good question and not one I've had before, actually. So in regards to certification, it's the entity that gets certified. So although we need to assess all the individual directors and senior managers, it's the entity that has the certification. So until we receive all applications and can assess all directors and senior managers, then we can't assess whether certification can be granted or not. Now, if you've given yourself enough time and you don't need to be certified until 6 months in advance, and you wish to send in applications every week, then that's fine. We can have a look at it, as long as you give us enough time to be able to assess all of them so that we can grant that certification. And one thing I would add there too, which makes it easier for us, Sonia, is if you do send in your application form and your ID in separate documents for us, it just makes us easier with the system that we're using.
Excellent, that's fantastic. Great, Kylie, thank you so much. I think one of the things that would be good for people to know, if there's any kind of FAQs out there. So we've tried to cover off as much as we possibly can in this environment, which is always a unique one because we're having to put questions that you may not have thought about. Is there an FAQ that could be useful for people to see?
Yeah, there certainly is. And we know with any new regime, Sonia, that there's going to be confusion around it. So we have compiled a list of FAQs and we will load them onto the Commerce Commission website by the end of the week.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. So we're going to wind up slightly early. I think because some of the questions that we've got through, we've tried to sort of group them and cover them off as much as we can. But if we've missed you, or if you feel we haven't answered your question properly, then please feel free to fill in the survey at the end of this session, where there's the opportunity to put your questions in, or you can email us directly. So Kylie, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, for thinking about all the questions that came through, and for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. We're really grateful. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I just want to say thank you as well, Sonia. And I would just like to add that myself and my team are here to help you navigate this new requirement. So please reach out to us if you require any clarification or help with the certification process.
Great. And Penny's popped the email address where people can get hold of you and the team. Thanks, Kylie.
Thanks, Sonia.
And thanks to all of you for watching and engaging with this webinar. I know it's complicated with lots of information coming at you via Zoom, but I hope it's been helpful. So like last time and the other seminars, we're running a survey where you can let us know what we've missed or what areas you need more details around. At the end of the session, when you close this window, you'll be redirected to an anonymous survey. You can pop your questions in here, and you can also let us know what you thought of the seminar. It helps us to improve. So when the window comes up, you just click continue to go through to the survey. And as you've heard, if you've got any questions at all, or if you'd like to have information about this session or any of the other sessions, you can email us at credit.advocacy@comcom.govt.nz. So kia ora koutou for your attention and time. We really, really appreciate it. I'll close as we started with karakia. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapanui. Kia wātia, kia mama, te nāko. Te tiana te wairua e te ara tangata. Koe rā e rongo whakaere a ke runga, kia tēnei, tina huie, tai kie. Thanks everyone. Haere rā.